Hi, my name is Melissa Lee. I am the Secretary of the West Valley Homeschool Foundation, and today we are hosting a curriculum show and tell about spelling power. This spring, we wanted to have an in-person curriculum fair, but obviously those plans got ditched. Our plan wasn't, though, to have vendors come in to talk about their products and to sell things to people, but instead to have moms showcase from our group, showcase the things that they love. Sometimes when you're looking at curriculum online, it is so hard to really get a feel for what it's like when you're just viewing it on a website. So being able to talk to somebody who's actually using it and see the books and look at the worksheets and everything else is so helpful. So because we couldn't do that in person, we are hosting a series of these live online events with moms from our group, showcasing what they love. And then you can ask questions. And for those of you who couldn't be here live, it's going to live on the YouTubes so that you can go back and look at it later. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen to talk to us about spelling power.
Hi there, everybody. So glad to see each of you. And something I wanted to note is that the thing about spelling power is once you get a hold of the system, which is a pretty unique system, it is so easy and so fast and so not time consuming for the mom. And I love it for a variety of things that I'll talk about. But the thing that is weird is that it's such a unique system that's the big, that's why I have 5 pages of notes that I want to get through. And I don't want to scare you off by you know, a long explanation of how to do things, but it's just a unique system. And I've been using it for, I think, maybe 15 years. So I'm super happy with it. But I've made this as thorough as possible without being overbearing on any certain point. And even with that, you know, it's like 5 pages. So I love feedback. I want your feedback, but I also don't want us to have to sit here for 2 hours. I'll probably lose like everybody except maybe Melissa. So I don't want to say don't ask questions, because please do ask questions, but you might want to like put it in a chat in the chat function, and then Melissa will pose the questions to me, or just raise your hand. If I don't see you, Melissa will. And then so what I'm trying to say is I'll answer questions on the go as I'm able to, but I'm afraid that if I answer a whole bunch of questions, it will take way too long. So I hope that makes sense. I'm not trying to say that I don't want your feedback, because I do. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right in, if that's okay. And one of the things I was thinking about while preparing for this meeting here is all the reasons why I love spelling power and why it works. For those of you who don't know me, I have 6 kids. I just completed my 18th year of homeschooling. My oldest son is 23, and I homeschooled him since he was 5. My youngest child is 7. My oldest 3 are boys, and then we had an almost 5-year gap, and then the youngest 3 are girls. And I have the gamut from kids with learning disorders to kids who are hyper intelligent, and then kids who are kind of in the middle. So one of the great things about homeschooling a whole bunch of kids is that I've learned not to pat myself on the back too hard for the things they do well, and I don't kick myself too hard for the things they do poorly, because, you know, there's good curriculum helps a ton. Implementing good curriculum helps a ton, but a lot of it is just up to the variance of the kids. So one of the things I love about spelling power is it works for everybody. Whether your kid has a learning disorder, whether they're super intelligent, no matter what kind of learner they are, if it's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, it covers everybody. It also covers both phonics and sight words. So in the way they approach sight words is pretty unique. because they take into account when you are likely to encounter that word in a manner of, reading. So, a second grade book might not have the word thrive in it. Thrive is not a super complicated word, but Spelling Power is not going to put that in a third grade spelling list. They're going to wait until later in the levels, in the years. So another thing I like about Spelling Power is that it is efficient. It's efficient for the mom and it's efficient for the kid. It doesn't say, here are your 20 or 30 spelling words for the week, go study these and then we'll test you on Friday. So instead, Spelling Power takes the approach that it's only looking for the words that your kids don't know. So why test your kids on 26 million words that they already know how to spell? Instead, we're just going to work on the words that they don't know. So it's a little bit of an investigation to kind of weed those out. Like, oh, here's a word that I didn't know you didn't know how to spell, so we'll work on that one. I also like that it's an inexpensive system that can be used for multiple grade levels. It suggests starting in second or third grade. I've started as young as first grade with a 6-year-old. Sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. For instance, my youngest, Jeannie, was in first grade this past year, and I started her on Spelling Power and she just wasn't quite getting it. So we just closed that book and like, okay, we're gonna start again in second grade. So that's what we're doing. So it is an inexpensive system where the textbook, we'll go over that later, but you can find it used anywhere from $20, $25. New, it's about $43, but that is one book that will last you your entire, your kid's entire homeschool career. I have the newest edition, 4th edition, and I only bought that because the previous edition, the binding was literally falling apart. So when your book falls apart, you got to buy a new book. And then there are individual, they're called record books that are really inexpensive. We'll go over that too, but those are less than $5 on CBD.com, which is not hemp products, it's Christian Book Distributors, CBD.com. It's a little more expensive on Amazon. I think they're $8 on Amazon. Something else that I like is Spelling Power can be accomplished quickly. Once you get a hold of the system, which I would say is probably going to take you 1 to 3 weeks, both for mom and kid. It literally takes 10 to 20 minutes a day, once or twice a week. And that's it for the mom. Now for the kid, they're going to be working 10 to 20 minutes a day, let's say 2 to 5 times a week, depending on how often you want to do it. But it is super efficient for the mom. And it's also easy to integrate other spelling needs into the Spelling Power system, not just the lists that they have. They do have lists, and we'll get to that. But I want to give you an example. This was a sign that my 7-year-old put on her door yesterday. I don't know if we can see this in the right light. It says, "Do not disturb Jeannie," but disturb is spelled D-U-S-T-R-B. I wanted to like pull our student record book and write that in there just then, and I didn't, but that's a good example of how just you take everyday things that they are working on in science or history or any other thing that they might do, and you notice a misspelling, then you can easily integrate that into the Spelling Power system. So I think that works well. I also love it because the grade level evaluations that you start with help you determine if your child is behind or even if they are very advanced. So I have a rule in my household. Honestly, I don't like wasting time studying things that my kids don't need. And strangely enough, all of my kids like Spelling Power. They like to do the activity. but I do an assessment at the beginning of each school year, and if my child is 2 years or more ahead of their grade level, we don't study spelling for that child. And I've I've had kids actually disappointed. They're like, "Oh, but it's fun. I'm going to do spelling power." I'm like, like, you're already advanced. I am not wasting my time. Sorry, not. So I'll help you know if your child is behind, because that's one of the things that we homeschool moms struggle with. We're like, where are our kids at? You know, we teach to what they need, but sometimes there's that anxiety of, am I doing enough? Am I learning? You know, is my kid learning what they need to learn? And oh yay, Corey, hi. Okay, so yes, so the grade level assessment I think is very helpful to know where they're at. Multi-sensory approach, which is great for kids with a wide variety of styles that have disabilities. So what you might not like about spelling power is the first thing is, if you have a perfectionist child who would freak out if they got a word wrong and to study a long list of words on their own and then be tested at week's end, this is not the system for you. Or you'll have to work with that kid to say, no, it's okay that you've spelled this wrong. I am expecting you to spell things wrong. You know, this system kind of pushes, finds the boundaries of where your child is at. So with that system, they will spell things wrong, but I always try to encourage my kid, that's a good thing, not a bad thing, because I'm your mom, I'm your teacher. I need to know the areas where what are challenging for you. And if you never spell anything wrong, I don't know what's going on in your head. So when I see my child spell something wrong, it gives a little insight into how their brain is working and what things I need to work on. For instance, this sign, again, the do not disturb, with Jeannie, that U should be an I, and that's difficult because the schwa, ubiquitous in the English language, there's so many vague vowels, and there's no U in the second syllable, and every syllable needs at least one vowel. So those are the things I would, I wouldn't know that about my child unless she wrote something down and I saw it spelled wrong. I wouldn't know that we need to work on those things. So the other thing that you might not want to use spelling power about is that it's a kind of a complicated setup to understand the process. Stephanie, you mentioned that you've had the book for a year and you're like, it's a little intimidating, this big, it's a, thick 300-page book, and you're like, I don't even know where to start. And so unless you have somebody to walk you through it, it can be intimidating because you don't know what is, what's important and what is non-essential. So hopefully with this, it will encourage you to take the leap to try it out. And again, like I said, once you know how to use the system, once your child is familiar with the system, then it is super easy, super fast, and requires very little of the mom's time. So, talking fast here, sorry. So again, this is gonna sound like a lot of information, but please believe me that once you and your child get through that learning curve, which I think might take 1 to 3 weeks, it's super simple for the parent and requires very little time for the child too. And it's then very flexible. I found that actually about flexible systems, no matter what it is that one of the things that make a system flexible is that it has a lot of options. But when something has a lot of options, then it can kind of be difficult to understand what are the options that work best for you. And so I'm going to go through all the things about spelling power here. And that was just my intro. Okay, so what you need to get started basically is the Spelling Power textbook. And then these are not necessary, but they're super helpful. The Spelling Power student record books. And I'll tell you a little bit more about both of those. Spelling Power is on its 4th edition. You can buy it used, and of course the older editions are even less expensive than the current edition. The new editions, or well-equipped used new editions, come with 2 discs. I have never used either disc, but I will tell you what's on them. One disc has it's a DVD that is a quick start setup that's similar to what we're doing here. And then one is a CD-ROM that has teacher resources, including printables. But the printables are really just the stuff that comes in the student record book. So if you are hyper frugal, you can print out the different portions of what would go in the student record book, but since they are less than $5 each, and since then, you know, like I have a hard time keeping track of, you know, if I'm printing out 100 pages and then now I have to keep all those pages in order and my kid has to keep all those pages in order, that's a no. So like I'm going to spend the $5 per child per year to get the student record book and not have to print everything out that is on the discs that come with the most recent edition of Spelling Power. I have found that one of the best places to purchase used curriculum is actually eBay. And so I just did a quick check today, and on eBay you can it'll take $24 to $30 to buy a like new 4th edition, including the discs. If you buy it new on Amazon or on Christian book distributors, cbd.com, it's going to be $35 to $45. And older editions, of course, are cheaper. I have found, I haven't done like a exact one-to-one comparison, but it appears to me that the content of, especially the lists, are virtually identical from older editions, but what has changed is a lot of the supplemental material that's in the textbook. And honestly, I don't even use most of the supplemental stuff. I might refer to it. So I think you would be fine with getting an older edition. But just for reference in this video, I'm going to talk about page numbers, and that'll be the 4th edition, the newest edition. So the student record book, like I mentioned, it comes in 4 levels, and it's really just based on the size of handwriting. Like this, I don't know if you can see this. This is the oldest, oldest for 6th grade and up. It has narrow lines, whereas red is the youngest. It has lines that are, spread out for large handwriting for smaller kids. And actually, it looks like they're phasing out the red. Chat. Wait, let me see. I don't know how to do this. Every child needs a new record book each year. Yes, I would definitely suggest that. If you have a child that's a super bright speller and you don't need to do spelling as frequently with them, then you could probably get away with buying one every 2 years or so. But generally, yeah, you would have the textbook, which lasts you, 1st grade through 12th grade, and then a student record book. And additionally, the student record book, you can't really see this either, but it has a place that you can record your child's progress, like a percentage or however you want to keep the grades. So that's a handy place if you want to keep records for your child's work. So the student record book, the best price is on cbd.com. They're $4.93 each. And on Amazon, I think they're $8, $7.99, something like that. Let's see. I also wanted to say that for this demonstration, I don't have great examples of my kids' work because for the past 2 years, like I said, if my kids are testing 2 years or more above their grade level, I don't have them do spelling, and both Audrey and Fiala did that for the past 2 years, and then Jeannie did not, but we didn't do much spelling because she just wasn't quite ready for it. So if your child is a naturally poor speller, I would say wait until they're 7 or 8 to start. But if, you know, kids scribble things down for signs on doors and the like, and if you can tell they have a basic grasp of the ideas of spelling, then you could probably start them when they're 6. Okay, so we've done a little intro about what you might like about spelling power, what you might not like about spelling power, and then the actual materials. And so, yeah, actually that worked out well. Kristen wrote a question in the chat, so that works really well. Or if anybody else has any questions before I go on to kind of the nuts and bolts, like how you do it. Can't see, I think I can see.
And I'll keep chat open and looking at it so that I can flag them and you don't have to worry about toggling back and forth.
Okay. Okay, so how you begin is something called a survey test. Now in the Spelling Power textbook, the survey test is on page 44. There's Form A and Form B. One's on page 44 and one's on page 45. And there's really no difference to this. It's just that one year use Form A and the next year mix it up and use Form B because there's only those 2 survey tests that your kids only take that once a year. But I guess the author is thinking, you know, if your child does Form A in 3rd grade and Form B in 4th grade, then you go back to Form A in 5th grade. So I don't know, something like that. But either one would work. So again, it's important on the outset. Oh, I also want to pull this up in the, this is the student's book. This is the yellow one. And one of the first pages in there, where the lighting's weird, it says survey test. And then you just put the date and what form you've used. And so that's, yeah, one of the very first pages in the spelling record book. No matter what color or level you get, everyone starts out with a survey test. So let your child know that they will get words wrong on the survey test, and that you are looking for the point at which the survey test uncovers the limits of their knowledge. You know, of course, say that in a way that works for their understanding. But just as a mom, that is what you are trying to do with the survey test. You're looking to say, okay, this and no more. After this, it gets too hard for my kid. And the test roughly goes from easy through hard. However, it also takes into account how a young child is, how soon a young child is likely to encounter a word in their reading. So, for instance, on Form A, it has the word thrive, which I mentioned before, as number 42 out of 50. And that's not a particularly hard word, but that's not a word that a 2nd grader is likely to encounter in their reading. But it is a word that probably by 4th, 5th, 6th grade, they'll encounter. Whereas the word quarter is number 26, and the frequently misspelled word dollar is number 15. So you start with the first word, and you just continue going until your child gets 3 wrong within a word or two, or a total of 6 wrong. And at that point, you just stop.
Is this vocal? You're reading the small sentences out loud, and then they're writing it?
Yes. So I'll get to that in just a sec too, about kind of how you administer the survey test, and then there's something called a placement test, and then the daily test. How you administer all of those is pretty identical, and I'll go over that in just a sec. But actually, I'll do it right now. It's in my notes. So something that I wanted to note, and this is kind of an aside, but I have found with my kids that misspelling is often the result of mishearing, misunderstanding, or mispronouncing a word. So for each word, I have my kids, I say pencils down, which sometimes if you have an eager kid, that might be the most difficult part of spelling power, is saying, put your pencil down and slow down, make eye contact with me. So I have them put the pencil down, I have them make eye contact or even look at my lips while I'm speaking. And I say the word clearly. So like in this survey test, the survey test is the only one that gives you scripted sentences to use. The rest of the time, you just make up your own sentences. And sometimes I make up sentences on the survey test if I'm like, that's a dumb sentence. I'm not gonna use that. Let's see. So I say the word and have them watch me while I'm saying it. Then I use that word in a sentence. And then I have the child say the word aloud while I watch their mouth. So like for instance here, survey test form A, the second word is did. So I'm gonna say did. The sentence is, she did well on her test today. And then I stop, I look, I might have to prompt, okay, now you say it, did. And especially on the easier words, if you've got 6th graders, they're gonna roll their eyes and they're like, this is so stupid. But it's so helpful to know what your child is hearing, if what they're hearing is coming out properly as pronounced, how they're pronouncing it, and how they're, their understanding and their pronunciation affects their ability to spell. So I call that mini speech therapy. Like if your child has a severe speech problem, they're going to need an actual speech therapist. But I'm telling you, I have been able to correct minor tongue misplacement or mispronunciations, all sorts of things in this little section of say the word while I'm saying the word while you watch me. I say it in a sentence. Then the child says the word while I watch them pronounce it. And then they pick up their pencil and write. And so again, if you have a child who's a hurried know-it-all, which I have had those, this sequence can be challenging, but I make my kids slow down and do this with every single word. So again, after back to the survey test. So after your child has missed those 3 to 6 words, then you turn the page in the textbook to score it. It says survey test scoring chart. Now the thing that's unique about this is you count the number of words that they've gotten right, that they've gotten correct. So again, depending on the ability of your child or their age level, each survey test has 50 words in it. You might get up to word 10 and you have 4 correct, which I go across on the chart. That means the child's at grade level 1.7. That means 1st grade, 7th month. Or we might get up to word 34 before they've gotten their 6 words incorrect. So 34 minus 6 is 28. So they are on 6th grade first month. So that tells you what their grade level is for spelling. So what do you do with that? What do you do with that grade level? So on the scoring chart for the survey test, which again is on page 46 if you have a textbook with you, it says number correct, grade, and then level, and it gives a letter A, B, C, D up to K. And that is the spelling power level. They assign it by letters. So especially I would say so the next step is what's called a placement test. Now, if your child is, squarely in the middle of level A or level C, I have to tell you, sometimes I don't mess with those placement tests. We just move on to level C. But if your child is at the edge, either at the very end of level B maybe, or the beginning of level C, then you would go on to the placement test. And the placement tests are in the textbook. It's like, says placement test A, placement test B, and those are 20 words, and you are supposed to do all of the words on those lists. And then with that, you count the number of words misspelled. So for, I'm just gonna pull this up here. So placement test C, it's 20 words. So it says if they miss 13 through 20, they're missing all those words, then don't start with C, go down to level B. Similarly, if they didn't miss any wrong, if they've got 0 through 2 wrong on this placement test for C, then level up and start with test D. Because if it's too easy, I have kids that like things easy, but if it's too easy, then they don't learn anything. So, and again, I'm all about efficiency. Like, don't waste my time when we're homeschooling. If you're not learning anything and you just want things to be super easy, so you get 100% on everything, that's not me teaching you. That's me like congratulating you for how smart you are, which kids like to hear that, but it doesn't help them spell better. So yeah, so the survey test gives you their grade level and also their spelling power letter level. That's the survey test. And the placement test more kind of tightly refines that. And then, yeah, so that tells you where to start. And whether you're starting on level A, B, C, D, E, whatever, each level has what are called groups. So here is, for example, the textbook of level, see it starts, level C, and it starts with group 1, group 2, blah, 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 all the way up to, I don't know, there's probably 50-ish. But the thing that's unusual, what you might notice, especially about the later levels, is I didn't write this in my notes, it just occurred to me. For instance, group 1, it's the short A sound. They're all words that are short A. But when you get up into the higher levels, short vowels, you're probably not going to need to be tested about, your like words like math. So in level F or G, they're probably going to skip group 1. So hope that's clear. So across the levels, all of group 1 is short A. All of group 2 is short E. All of group 3 is short I, and it gets progressively harder. So in the lower levels, they spend more time on short vowels or just introducing long vowels like A, E, I, O, U. Okay, you with me? We're doing okay? So once you get your child's level where they're at, and by the way, I spend one day on the survey test, and that will take longer than 15 minutes because it's potentially up to 50 words, but probably not. If you're in, I've only had kids make it through 50 words when they're 9th, 10th grade or so. But that will probably take you longer than 15 minutes. And then you just call it a day. And then the next day, then you do the placement test. Because ideally, you don't want to burn the kids out. Nobody wants to spend longer than 15, maybe 20 minutes on spelling every day. So it's not the sort of thing that you can knock everything out in one day and then now you're ready for spelling. It helps to give their brains a little rest from that. But once you have their level, so their grade level from the survey test, you took the placement test and they're going to start at level C. Then in the student record book, there's what's called a daily test. And I don't know if you can see this very well, but there's a place for the date and level, so that would be like C1. And then there's a bunch of lines, and that is for so every group has a spelling rule. And to be honest, I don't have my kids copy that. A lot of them are really straightforward. Like group 1 here, it says usually the sound A is spelled A as in cat. That's straightforward. That can be helpful. But then you get up to group 8 and it's the long I, and it says I can be spelled I-E, I-G-H, Y, or I followed by 2 consonants such as wild, or I followed by a consonant and a silent E as in kite. And depending on where your kids are with their handwriting skills, that in itself can take 15 minutes. So I will usually just say, okay, today's words all have the long I sound, and the long I can be spelled in a number of different ways, and have a little dialogue about that. See if your child, has some knowledge about how the long I sound can be spelled. So yeah. So I usually don't have my kids write down that spelling rule, but there is room for it if you want them to do it. Also, I find that kids don't learn really well from spelling rules, especially if you have one that's really long and then they're supposed to remember the 12 different combinations that can make the A sound. They're not going to do that. They're not going to recall, oh, I remember from the spelling rule I memorized, this is the 9th of 12. I mean, your 8-year-old is not going to do that. So good luck with that. If you want to try it, I don't. Okay, so yes. Okay, so each group has a spelling/phonics rule. Book suggests you have the child copy that rule. I don't do that, almost never. And so now, see, this is day 1, your first time ever doing spelling power. You're on level C1. Also, each of the lists they're not uniform in the number of words they have, but it looks like there's about 18 here. So they'll be somewhere between 12 and 20 words. But I found also, depending on how fast your child works, how resistant, if they're super resistant, you're not going to get through all 18 words, or if they are making a lot of errors, either because they're just not focused, or it's challenging, or it's a challenging sound. Some kids can fly through long A sounds, but then you get to O, the sound O, and that's tricky for them. So I will set the timer for 20 minutes. And when we get to 20 minutes of doing this, if you've gotten through 6 words or you've gotten through all 20 of them, then we just call it a day for spelling. Your mileage may vary. It depends on your kids and your desire to push through. But I used to be a pusher througher, and now I don't. There's a kind of a fine line there. You want to challenge your kids without overwhelming them. And again, one of the things I like about Spelling Power is it's flexible enough that you as the mom, you can call it. You know, if they're blazing through and they're doing great with spelling and you can make it all the way through that you're 18 words, then great. And if they don't, then push them just a little and then call it a day for spelling after 6 words or however many that you get through. So yeah, test as long as it works for you or your child. You can decide to do it until they get 3 wrong or for a certain number of minutes. You know, that part's up to you. But one of the things that's unique about Spelling Power is your kid has not studied this list. So level C, group 1 here, it's am, happy, family, asked, black, paths, grab, math, van, rabbit, camp, mad, fast. So some of those are pretty simple and some of them are a little tricky. They're not studying any of this. You're just giving it to them cold turkey. And so the idea is, so you are, you know, pencils down, I say it, I put it in a sentence, the child repeats it back to me, pencils up, they spell the word. When they're done spelling, they put the pencil down. Now I have kids that are like, what do you think, Mom? Is this, you know, they don't want to put the pencil down because they're not sure. And I'm like, it's fine if you get it wrong. It's fine if you don't know, because if you don't know, we'll do 10-step study, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and you'll learn it. So, so sometimes I have to tell my kid, put the pencil down. And then if they're right, they're right. And you go on to the next word and their pencil's down and you know, say the word, say the sentence, they repeat it back to you, pick your pencil back up. But if it's wrong, what I have them do, so in their daily test thing that they're writing their words on, again, lighting's not great. So I have them put a line through it. If it's wrong, immediately, you just stop in the middle of the test. So rabbit, R-A-B-B-I-T, has 2 B's. Okay, they only put 1. So have them cross it out with just 1 line. 1 line. Some kids are like, they want to scribble out. I'm like, no, don't scribble it out because I want to see your progress. Mom needs to know what's going on inside your brain. So 1 little line across, and then I tell them it's spelled correctly, R-A-B-B-I-T. So, and then you go on to the next word. And again, that's why you need to be flexible with time, because sometimes you'll blaze through a list and they don't have any, you know, they get them all right, or maybe miss 1. And sometimes they miss 3, 4, 5. But generally between 3 and 5, if they miss 3 and 5, I call it a day, because then they're going to put those words on a column. It's called Words to Learn, and they do a 10-step study. So I find with kids, you don't want more than 5, maybe 7 words on that Words to Learn column in the 10-step study, because they've got to work through each word. And we'll go over that in just a sec. That's what's next, or almost next. Let me check my notes here. So yeah, so sometimes, like, we'll be doing spelling while I'm in the kitchen, you know, prepping something for tonight's dinner, or washing dishes. I don't do dishes anymore. I've got 6 kids. Somebody else does dishes. But, you know, if you know, Spelling Power is such that I do want to make eye contact with my kids while they're doing the work, but you don't necessarily have to sit right next to them. But if they've put their pencil down, I typically have my kids say it out loud. Okay, put pencil down, R-A-B-I-T. So I know right away they've not spelled that right. So yeah, then that goes into Words to Learn.
Before you move on to words to learn, there's a question in chat. So
Oh.
basically, each day's lesson will be just like you did the survey test.
Actually, no, because it's called a daily test, but that's kind of poorly named. You end up with Spelling Power, depending on your schedule, which actually I'm going to do next. You only do this list once or twice a week. And the rest of the time goes into studying the words that they missed. Now, if you've got a brilliant speller and they're blazing through it and they're only getting 1 or 2 words wrong on every group, well, perhaps they should have been in the next more challenging level, so you can level them up. Or you can just say, you're brilliant. You only have 2 words in the 10-step study, and you can do that now, and we can do more spelling tomorrow. But the daily test is similar to the survey test in that you as the mom, as the parent, you say the word out loud while they watch you. You put it in a sentence. They say the word back to you. Then they pick up their pencil and write that word out. Then they're done with the word. Put the pencil down. They say it out loud how they spelled it, and then you assess right then, did they get it right or did they get it wrong? And if they get it right, you just move to the next word. If they get it wrong, you put the correct spelling right there in their daily test. So it's pretty clear which ones they've gotten wrong because it's misspelled, has a line through it, then right next to it is the correct spelling. So I'll go on to what you do with those incorrect words in just a sec here, but I am the kind of homeschool mom that makes notes in my textbooks, and so I can never resell them. This one is a new one, so it hardly has any notes. But generally what I do, because you as a mom also need to remember what they have gotten right and what they have gotten wrong. So I don't know if this is gonna show up, but like say here, I put a little dot next to the ones they get right and a little check mark next to the ones they get wrong. Because the next daily test that you do, you start out with the words that they got wrong on the last daily test. And yeah, so say they've gotten 3 words wrong, you're going to write those in the words to learn. You do something called a 10-step study, which I'll go over in a few minutes. And then it's either, the next day or a couple days later, you're checking that word again after they've studied it. So, yeah, so when you're done, either the list is exhausted or you're exhausted or your child is exhausted. And then what I do is have my kid transfer all the words they've gotten wrong into, on the next page, there's something called a 10-step study sheet. So all the words they got wrong, you write it correctly, and then there's a series of check boxes and blanks. We'll go through each of those 10 steps in just a sec. But I want to interrupt that a little bit to talk about the schedule. So in this Spelling Power textbook, they suggest that you work in 15-minute increments. So basically, Stephanie, one day you're going to be doing the actual tests, but then the next day the child is studying those words on their own. Well, eventually it'll be on their own once they understand how to do that. So on page 87 of the textbook, it says using the study, test, study approach. And that really should be named how to schedule this. So on day 1, let's just call it Monday. Monday, you would do a daily test. So, and then on day 2, your child does the 10-step study minus the sentences, because they're going to do something called 10-step study, and then they write each word in a sentence. So it's suggesting that you do the 10 steps, the child does a 10-step study minus the sentences. Day 3, write the words in a sentence. Depending on your kid, some kids find that really challenging to create sentences. Some don't. And then it suggests day 4, review. Day 5, start a new daily test. So that's why I say you're doing it once or twice a week. I often will have my child do 10-step study and the sentences all in the same day. So it's basically, it could be a 2-day turnaround, that one day, like on Monday, you're doing you're doing the daily test. Tuesday, they're doing 10-step study and their sentences. And then the next day, you do another daily test. Or you can put a break in there and, you know, do spelling again on Thursday or Friday. So that's kind of up to you. If you want to stretch that out over the course of a week and only get through one group in a week, that's totally fine. It's up to you. The pace of how you want to go, the pace of, you know, how your child's pace is. But it's not, so there's kind of a schedule, but it's flexible according to what your schedule is and the needs of your child. So I aim to do spelling twice a week. And once you and your child learn the 10-step study, then that becomes seat work, well, what we call seat work. And I define seat work as work that my kids can do independently, that they don't need instruction from me about. So once you get the method down, the reason it's so easy for the mom is because all you are doing is administering that daily test once or twice a week. The rest of it is work that your kids are doing based on words that they've gotten wrong. And of course, you'll need to check that work over, but it's pretty quick to check it. So, okay, so now I'm moving on to 10-step study and words to learn. Somebody, did I see a hand? Yes, no? Okay. So again, your child will only study the words they misspelled. If there's 18 words and they got 16 right, then they only need to study 2 words. And this 10-step study it's a multi-sensory method that works best when you work with them until they get the hang of it. So again, depending on the age of your child or how well they work independently, it might take a few weeks to, and especially it's new for you too. So at the beginning, you know, maybe just plan for at least a month that you are going to sit down with your kid every time they do spelling, even if it's the independent seat work, because it's not independent seat work until they know how to do that work. But again, once you and your child get into the swing of things, you as the parent will only be doing spelling with your child 10 to 20 minutes, 2 times a week tops. And so 10-step study, I find it's important that the child does not skip any of the steps. So even you might not know what step it is that seals the understanding for your child. The idea behind the 10 steps is that some of them are visual, some of them are auditory, some of them are kinesthetic. And I mean, unless you have like a master's in occupational therapy or something, you might not know your child's best way of learning. So your kid might even say, this is dumb, why do I have to do 10? And then you look over and they're just going check, 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 check in each of the 10 boxes. And you're like, no, you know, don't do that. But again, like I said, my kids, maybe I just have weird kids, but my kids have actually all enjoyed doing the 10-step study. And it's just, I don't know, it's part of it's because it's fairly quick once you get the grasp of it, and especially the kinesthetic part can be really fun. So let's see, move on to that. So I suggest that you do not skip any of the steps. So in the, I'm going to show you something here, both because it's a little amusing and because on my screen this does not look very clear. Is this focused? Yeah, no, it's not. I wonder if my camera is smudgy. Hold on just a sec. Maybe it's just the lighting.
I think get it closer, even if you're covering your face. There, that's better.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so here's 10-step study. Okay, so on this side here, so this is Fiala, actually, the words were June, arrested, California, island, and bridge. And then there are check marks for each of those. And then down at the bottom, there are, you put it in a sentence, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but she illustrated her sentences as well. So that's what the 10-step study page looks like. So either I suggest that you as the mom write down the words in the words to learn column. So you're just taking them off of the previous page of the daily test where they got it wrong, or say your child makes a sign for her bedroom and spells disturbed wrong, you can write that correctly in the words to learn column. And then your child will go through each of those words one at a time and put little check marks in the box when they've accomplished that step. And some of them are faster than others. But I will, let's see. So if you write the word, you yourself, just to make sure they don't spell it wrong, because sometimes even if they, if they spelled it wrong, they crossed it out, you told them how to spell it correctly, it's still just turning that page. I've found that there's a lot of spelling errors transferred because they're like, oh, I don't need to look, I know how to spell this now. And then they write it in the words to learn column and they've written it incorrectly. And that is a bummer when they go through 10-step study learning how to spell a word incorrectly, because then you have to go back and unlearn everything. So that is why, after having a number of kids, I actually do that first step for them where I write it into the words to learn column, just so that I know the handwriting is correct and that the word is spelled correctly. So if you write it yourself, suggest that your child traces that word with their pencil. You've written the word arrested down, now your child's going to trace that. That's step one. So step one is putting the words in the word to learn column. And then step two, it says say. I'm gonna hold this up again. So right here it says say. Yeah. And that is simply saying the word aloud. Just read it out loud. And again, you might have a kid, you're like, this is dumb. I don't want to do this. I don't want to say it out loud. Make them do it. They say the word out loud, and that's super simple. They say it out loud, put a little check in the box. Then the next step is called look. And that's the step where your child might need the most help, because you're looking for unusual things about the word that might trip up your child. In the textbook, page 70 has 11 suggestions of things that you can look for, and they're not hard and fast. They're just so it's not like you have to go through all 7. But for instance, so I'm just going to give you a couple examples. Can I write the word the way it sounds? In other words, does the word follow easy phonics rules? Could be yes, could be no. Are there double consonants? Rabbit. Okay, 2 B's, I only wrote it with 1. I need to remember this word has 2 consonants in a row, R-A-B-B-I-T. Are there any double vowels? So for words like, receive, R-E-C-E-I-V-E, I often use that time to review little phonics rules, like when 2 vowels walk together, the first one says its name. So receive, R-E-C-E-I-V-E, or you could say I before E except after C, or something like that. And then also, or you could say, are there any difficult letter combinations, like IGH or something like that? So especially if your child is younger, the look portion of their 10-step study is the one where they may need the most help. So you are basically trying to figure out, where did my, what is tricky about this word for my child? Just kind of, you're just looking at the word and, trying to figure out if there's, are there maybe 3 consonants in a row, like straight, S-T-R. So that's the look part. And then the 4th step is say and spell. So you are literally just saying the word aloud again, and you're looking it. So they're saying it aloud. They are looking at it. They're reading it. R-A-B-B-I-T. You're just saying it and spelling it aloud. Check. Easy. And then close and spell. You close your eyes and spell it aloud. R-A-B-B-I-T. Open your eyes. Put a check in the box. And then the next step is check. So that's a self-check where the child checks to see if they got it right from closing their eyes and spelling the word. And again, they're just, at that point, they're just spelling it aloud again. They're not writing it down. And then step 7 is called trace and say. So I suggest that this is a very important step. And for kids, they find this the most fun step. So what trace and say is about is it's helping connect kinesthetically, which is using your movement and nerves to help cement that word in your child's brain. So in trace and say, what your child does is they just use their finger and they trace that word on a textured surface. So I'll often have my kids just do spelling, their 10-step study, while they're sitting at the coffee table on a rug. So they'll just use the textured surface of the rug. They're spelling it in big letters on the rug. Or another idea, you can use sandpaper on concrete or on grass if you're outside, on a remnant of textured fabric. On the wall, there's textured, almost all of our walls here in Phoenix have a textured surface sprayed on. So they literally just write that word on a textured surface. So they're receiving sensory input about that word. If you have kids that are really kinesthetic learners or really, glom on to this part, and if you don't mind making a mess, you can have, actually what I've done is I had a sand tray for one of my kids in a rectangular, like Tupperware kind of container that had a lid. And that was just his sand spelling tray. And so when he did 10-step study, we pulled that off, we take the lid out, and he liked writing that word on the sand. You can do a similar thing like with rice or with beans. If you have kids that are really kinesthetic, you can make it fun by providing a tray of hair gel or shaving foam. Or also, this isn't quite tracing, but some kids, it really helps them, like if you give them a pile of letters, like we have letters that are foamy magnets, and one of my kids particularly enjoyed sorting through the pile, finding the letters, and putting it on a little magnetic board that we had. So it's really just the action of you're trying to involve as many of your child's senses in spelling and to help them remember the words that they are not spelling correctly. So another thing they do in trace and say, each time they write the letter, whether it's on sandpaper or what, they're spelling it out loud, R, A, B, B, I, T. So if you don't have a kid that's particularly kinesthetic, it could be as easy as that. And I mean, takes 20 seconds and you're done. But there are definitely kids, you know, especially your squirmiest, most active, most physical kids really benefit from the kinesthetic part of learning. So, you know, if you if you're prepared, you can come up with a list of things they could do a different thing for each word, or, you know, first, you know, today we're doing, you know, mix it up every day, make it a surprise what they're going to do for the kinesthetic part. You know, you pull out, you're like, today we're doing spelling, and you pull out a piece of fine grit sandpaper. They're like, what? What are we doing here? So there's just lots of different ways that you can mix that up and help involve their kinesthetic learning. You know, you're engaging that part of their brain. So when they're seeing it, they're using their body to write it out. They're tracing it on a rough surface. They're saying it out loud, engaging their ears. That is the whole idea behind spelling power, is you are engaging as many of their senses as they can to help them remember how to spell words that they naturally spell incorrectly. So you're cementing it in their brains, in as many different parts of their brain as possible. You're engaging as many senses as possible, so that when it comes to, you know, they encounter that word again and to spell it out, it's now encoded in their brain in like 6 different places, and it's not so mysterious. So it's not just the act of slowing down and studying each word individually, it's literally finding different ways to get that correctly spelled word into the child's head. So after, let's see, after trace and say, then it's check, and that's simply where they look back at the correctly spelled word to make sure they spelled it correctly in the trace and say step. And then the next one is write, and there's a blank space. Blank space for the child to write the word. So I usually get a sticky note, a Post-it, and you have to, you know, tell them to cover up the word that, because they're writing it. So, I mean, some kids, depending on how sneaky your children are, which I've had kids that are super sneaky and then some who are not sneaky at all. You know, if they're not sneaky at all, just have them cover it up with their hand. And if they're a little bit sneaky, you know, cover it up with a Post-it. If they're super sneaky, you might have to stay next to them and make sure they're not peeking. But honestly, by the time they get to that step right, which is the 9th step in their 10-step study, chances are really high that they are going to remember how to spell that word. Now, there are some words that are just sticky for a particular kid, and they've had to go around this 2, 3, sometimes 4 times, but that's pretty uncommon. I would say, you know, a good 90% of the time, once they go through the 10-step study, that word is no longer a challenge for them. And they're going to spell it right the next time, and they'll remember it like forever, because it's lodged in their brain in so many different places because you've engaged so many of their senses. And then the 10th step is check. So they just look to see that their newly written word is spelled correctly. And then there's a last step, technically it's the 11th, it says repeat. That is if they don't spell the word correctly. But I would suggest to just give them a little brain break. If on the right section, if they've spelled it incorrectly again, just transfer it into another day's, you know, the next day's words to learn. So they go over it again, but they don't get burnt out on that word. And maybe the next day, use a different trace and say method on that. Okay, so I don't ever have them repeat it on the same day. Okay, so the last portion of spelling power, of them studying the word, is they're writing the word in a sentence. And that's as simple as it sounds. I suggest that you do not help your kids with spelling on this, because any misspelled words can be transferred into the words to learn on their next list. And again, you don't know where their strengths and where their weaknesses are until you see them writing things out. This is a total aside. I didn't write this in the notes, but I had one kid that struggled mightily with spelling, and he's now a sophomore at ASU, so he's fine. But he's still not a great speller. But I went through a bunch of investigation to figure out what was going on in his head, and I listened to a bunch of well, back then they were on tapes, cassette tapes, by Andrew Pudawa, who is the Institute for Excellence in Writing. He's the guy that, he's really brilliant. And one of the things that I learned from him is that there is a big difference in brain dynamics between encoding and decoding. So decoding is reading. And I used to think that if somebody's good in reading, they're going to be good in spelling. And that is not necessarily true. Because on Sunday morning, honestly, I was having a little quiet time and had my Bible out, and Jeannie wanted to crawl up in my lap. She's talking to me. I'm like, take your own children's Bible, go sit on the couch and read the book. And I said, read 3 stories. And then honestly, I kind of ignored her. And then about, I don't know, 45 minutes later, I guess I really ignored her, and she's like across the room from me. She's like, okay, I finished the book. And this is a really thick Bible story, you know, it's for early elementary kids, but she is an excellent reader and a crappy speller. She's the one that spelled disturb, D-U-S-T-R-B. And she spelled choose the other day. Oh, no, I can't remember. It was like, she has really creative spelling. And that's because there's just it's different brain mechanics for decoding, which is reading, and encoding, which is understanding a word, hearing it aloud, or remembering it in your brain, and that traveling from your brain down your arm into the physical, you know, aspect of writing it on a paper or even saying it out loud. Those are 2 completely different mechanics in your, you know, mechanic systems in your brain. So again, like if I was just going based on reading ability, I would think, oh, Jeannie's going to be a great speller. And no, she's not. And there's other kids that can spell really well, but they're not necessarily advanced readers. So again, one of the things I like about spelling power is it helps you as a parent determine where your kid is having issues, where their hangups are, where the challenges are, because you're never going to be able to teach those things or reinforce them if you don't know that they're a challenge. Okay, so yes, so because of that, and for other reasons, I won't help my kids, you know, if they're like, you know, how do you spell November in their, you know, in the sentences that they're writing out? I won't help them because I want to see what they're going to do. Are they going to capitalize the N? Are they going to put the ER, you know, even though you don't really say the E? So again, so writing the sentences, it's a little bit of creativity and it's a little bit of investigation. Again, you as the parent figuring out what's going on in your kid's head, and you know, maybe you'll be amused by what they write. I also want to mention the book suggests that they write 1 sentence per word that they've spelled wrong. I don't like that because I'm totally fine with my kids creatively combining words into complex sentences that uses several of their words to learn. Because my daughter Fiala is kind of famous for that. So like if she has 5 words, man, she is she's going to sit there and ponder for quite a while, inventing a little story in her head that will use all 5 of those words. Now, I think she would probably go through things a lot faster if she just write a basic sentence with each of those words, but she enjoys that activity, that challenge of creating a story that combines all of those words into one sentence. So that is, she always uses that as a little challenge for herself, and I think that's excellent. So, so for instance, she wrote this sentence: June stole California Island Bridge, so she was arrested. And her words were June arrested California Island and Bridge. And that works. And then she illustrated it. So somebody being arrested and in jail in a cop car. But from that, you know, I corrected her capitalization. There was a little punctuation thing at the end. And so that writing it in a sentence is a little opportunity to reinforce writing skills, creativity, and also just to see, you know, as homeschooling mom, I'm always looking for what's making my kids tick, you know, what's going on inside their head. So
Corey wants to just double check. Do they still do the sentence even if they spelled the word correctly? But this is the sentences, and the 10 steps is just for words they spelled incorrectly on their daily test.
Right. It's only for the words that they spelled incorrectly. And I'm so sorry, everybody's writing these chat things, and
it's okay. I got it taken care of.
Okay, so wait, let me make sure that, where can we find the student books again? Yeah, they are on Amazon, but also CBD has the best prices, but they require, I think, $50 before you get free shipping. So, you know, it's up to you. Different colors. So yes, and the different colors are grade levels. I had that in my notes, but I don't think I covered that. So red is for the youngest, but I think those are out of print. I couldn't find those readily. So blue is for grades 2 to 4. Green is grades 4 to 5. Yellow is grades 6 and up. One of the things that's nice about CBD as well is they have sample pages that you can view. So you can tell, oh, that, you know, my kid is never going to write that small. Or conversely, my kid writes small. He's in 3rd grade, but, you know, the lines they're giving him to write on are giant. That would be tedious. So you level up to, the only difference really is the size of the, you know, of the lines on which they're writing. And yeah, so it's grade level, but it's really more like the size of the script that they write. And do they still do the sentence if they spell the word correctly? So again, not on the daily test. So so writing the sentence. So at the top, you've got 10-step study sheet, and then writing the sentence is on that same page. So, and on this 10-step study sheet, they're only writing the words that they previously spelled wrong. So they're putting into a sentence only the words that they previously spelled wrong, which hopefully now they're spelling correctly. So let's see. So again, if your child has a pretty good grasp on sentence composition, that step can be done on the same day as the 10-step study. But if the list of words to learn is long, and or if constructing sentences is really challenging for your child, I would save that for a separate day, like the next day. And then, so when you do the next day's daily test, you start, as the mom, you start with the words that they spelled incorrectly previously. Now they've done the 10-step study, and so you're going to immediately quiz them So ideally, you know, you want to do spelling twice a week. I try to do it Monday, Thursday. So if on Monday my child spelled a word wrong, Tuesday, maybe part of Wednesday, they study it. Thursday, I'm quizzing them again. So it's almost immediate feedback, you know, if that 10-step study stuck, if, you know, if it worked. And then it's you know, a lot of times it's a celebration. You're like, on Monday, this word was way too hard for you, and now here it is 3 days later, and you're spelling all of them right. Then that is affirming for the child too, that they have overcome that, you know, little challenge. And so yeah, so that's another reason why I don't I don't do the phonics rule with the groups, because often we'll have 4 or 5 words from either from their, you know, their science notebook or their previous, you know, 10-step study words that they did from the previous group. So they might have 1, 2, 3, 5 words that you're starting the next day's, you know, the next daily test. You start that out with the words that they previously spelled wrong. So rabbit, we're going to start with rabbit. And then I'll say, okay, now all the rest of these are new words, and they all have the short I sound, like if. And then, you know, we get on with that. And so that's another reason why it's kind of like we almost never make it through a whole list on the daily test, because they're not just doing the daily test words, they're doing the words that they previously got wrong. And yeah, and I was like, if they're never getting words wrong, again, either you probably don't have to be doing spelling, or they need to be at a more challenging level, or, you know, or something. So, but I find there's lots of opportunities to find words that your kids have spelled wrong and just add that in.
If you're splitting the group list on the daily test, if you're adding in the ones that they got wrong plus any other ones from your life that you want on there, if you're not covering all of the new ones on that same day, do you do it a daily test the next day with those
Yes.
additional words? Okay.
Yes. So like if there's 18 words in group 1 and we get through 8 the first week or 10 the first week, then the balance of those would be in the next daily test. So, and voila, you're done. That's, oh my gosh, it's 2:30. That's crazy. So that's about it. Okay. So again, it sounds really complicated, but it's pretty easy to get a flow. And again, you know, and maybe it's because I've been doing this for so many years, but it doesn't take long to pick up the system. And again, it's the sort of thing where you can sit down next to your child and do it, or you can be across the kitchen from them or something. I would suggest that even if they're doing seat work, that you be available just to make sure, because there are definitely kids that will say, you know, just put check marks in all of the boxes and say, I did it, and they didn't. But then that'll become apparent if they keep misspelling the same words too. So yeah, everything's feedback. I mean, I like I like feedback. I need to know if something is working for my kids, if they're learning. Yes, Stephanie.
Yes, I have a question. So you said you do the assessment for your kids at the beginning of the year to see if they're ahead. What assessment is that? Is that the same one you're talking about here?
Yes, it's called a survey test.
Okay, the survey test.
It's a survey test. It's 50 words. In the textbook, it's on page 44 or 45. You could pick either A or B, it doesn't matter. And that's you won't get through all 50 words unless your kids are in high school or they're amazing spellers. So that survey test, you only do that once a year. And it's basically just placing where they are. And I have kids that, like, you know, they make little progress, you know, throughout the year, and then kids that skip 2 levels from one year to the next, or kids that were only on grade level this year, next year they're 2 grade levels ahead, and mom won't do spelling with them on a, you know, formal spelling. Although even with the kids that I don't do formal spelling, I almost always, I buy them their record book, and words that they do misspell throughout the year, it's pretty easy once they've learned the system, like, oh, that's going in your words to learn column, and they know what that means. Then even if we don't do spelling, like by sitting down and doing a list with them a couple of times a week, it still enables you to reinforce the spelling skills of even kids that are really good spellers that just have a few words every once in a while that are tough. So.
Thank you.
Sure. So.
Does anybody else have a question? If you dive into Spelling Power and you have a question 2 weeks from now, you can always come to Karen and she will try to help you. But if nobody else has questions right now, I'm super thankful for this because I'm sitting here with my giant Spelling Power that I don't have the patience to read through the first 50 pages of. So I am so it's intimidating. So you walking through it and being able to take notes about it has been super helpful.
But what's good to have, like, once you know kind of the basics of how Spelling Power works, the author has included, I mean, tons of information that you could take it further, like word card games and just different games, and also information about parts of speech. There's all sorts of information in here in the textbook that, thanks, babe. Like some of it is just like there's this thing, positive attitudes and a spelling conscience, you know, like developing interest in words, showing the student that the words taught are those most likely to be needed by him now in the future. I mean, there's all sorts of supplemental information in here that frankly I've only rarely tapped into. So yeah, actually that's why I wanted to do this, because if you've never used Spelling Power and you've got this 300+ page book, it's hard to discern like what you need to, you know, utilize to get started. But now that you know like what to do to get started, if you do have, you know, challenges with your kids and need, you know, skill building activities or to create new lessons, they also have oh my gosh, my dog's in like, you have neglected me for too long. So like she even writes out, like, here are like the different groups. Cleo, crazy dog. And then it suggests activities for those. So there's so many more resources in the textbook than what I've covered. But hopefully this is enough. It should be enough for you to get started and have a basic, you know, understanding of how the system works. And then if you need additional help or reinforcement or ideas about how to better optimize that trace and say kinesthetic step, or there's lots of information in there about different learning challenges and styles of learning and how to maximize the teaching and learning of spelling to accommodate how your kids learn. So so that's all in there, but I honestly just haven't used most of that. But it's in there if you want it.
Thank you, Karen. I have the 3rd edition. And so looking through it based off of what you were sharing for the 4th edition, it's not much of a difference.
Yeah, it's really not.
So that was a great breakdown. Now I feel like I can dive into it and understand how to go about it every day.
Good.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, and the
very informational.
Oh, good. And the student record book doesn't matter what edition that you use either. It's a direct, you know, you could use the 1st edition and the student record book and it would be totally fine. I've just found that in each of the newest editions, it has more information about those interventions or activities that you might want to use for games or, you know, other skill builders, information about using flashcards and stuff like that to help them study. Because, you know, depending on how you want to schedule it out and depending on how challenging spelling is for your kid, you know, you could do a daily test on Monday. They do the 10-step study and sentences on Tuesday. And then maybe Wednesday could be your, you know, game day, flashcards, additional, you know, skill builder type of stuff before you go on to a new list. But so those opportunities are there for you if you want to do it. But I've done very few of those. So thank you for staying with me. I almost feel badly for taking up so much of your time, but hopefully it's a help.
It is. Thank you. Anybody else need to pipe up? All right. Thank you again, Karen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Go check the events tab because we have even more sessions like this coming up next week. Bye, everybody.